Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I am back with another video. Today's video is featuring some products from Trinity Stamps. This is local programming and what is the die called? Stay Tuned, I think, TV die. And then there's another one which I didn't use called Please Stand By. And then I used the Dad Sentimental Sets. So from the moment that this set graced my screen, I knew that I was going to use this for my dad's Father's Day card the moment that I saw it. So I'm going to go through cutting these dies, and like these little pieces of dies is a great way to use up scraps. You guys know me, you know I'm a totally cheap chicken and I want to use up all of the cardstock that I pay money for. So typically I pull out a bunch in the colors that I know I'm going to be looking for and I try to see what will fit. This piece I'm cutting out of craft because I want to do that like old school vinyl, like, is it vinyl? Is it, it's a sticker kind of wood kind of thing, faux wood. Anyway, so I use craft as the base of that, but I'm also going to end up cutting that out of the gray and white as well, because it cuts out all three of those pieces. In addition to that, there have the, like the channel and the speaker, and so I'm going to cut one of them out of, I thought I was going to do the darker gray cardstock, but I ended up deciding just to go black and keep it so it all matched, as well as like the little feet for the TV. And then I used the gray for the top portion that like actually has the detail of the speaker. And I used this silver, what is this? I think it's from Concord 9th. It's like a matte silver for the dial, the buttons, and the rabbit ears. So just if you're going to, you know, when you have one of these like dies that has more like smaller pieces that you're going to be using, pull out what you have so that you're using up what you can. These are all, like you can see one of them is a rounded rectangle. I must have cut that out of the middle of a card somewhere. But anyway, let me tell you, because we're going to have story time, because this is just really a lot of putting the die, like cutting the die and putting the die together. There is some coloring, but it's pretty simple coloring because it's not very large. So in that local programming, they have the news, they have a cooking show, and they have this scene that we are using today, which is, my friends, The Price is Right. Come on down. So why is this my dad's Father's Day card? Well, first of all, because we had one of these TVs. For real. We did, in the basement. And it was, well, it probably, when I was young, and I didn't even know it, was probably the television that we had upstairs in our family room. And originally when I was going to do the scene, I thought that I was going to do it, like where the TV was like caddy corner, because that's how all of our TVs, that's how my parents' TV still is, honestly, because just of the way of their house is shaped, they have one long wall that has the couch on it, and then the other long wall is broken up by French doors. So the only place to put the TV is caddy corner. Oh, let's talk about the trick I just did. So those little teeny tiny buttons, you guys know I hate finicky dies. And so those little teeny tiny ones, I don't want to mess around with to make sure they're straight. So what I did was when I cut them, I poked them out. I tried to, as to the best of my ability, poked them out while they were still on the cutting mat. And you saw one I kind of had to chase around a little bit. But anyway, once I got that one lined up, I picked them all up with a piece of tacky tape. You just want low tack tape. I prefer pixie tape. And then I picked them all up at the same time. That way I can add a little dab of glue behind them and put the tape down right over where I need them to go, and they'll all be perfectly aligned. For stamping my little guy, I thought it was going to be easier, and I still stand by this, to stamp the scene after I had the TV screen cut, so that way I could see where it was going to go versus trying to line the die up over top of an already colored scene. So I just taped the corners to another piece of cardstock. I still used my magnet to hold that larger piece of cardstock in place. And then I can go ahead and stamp my little Price is Right scene here. This is obviously Bob Barker Price is Right, not Drew Carey Price is Right, which is perfect because that's what I grew up with. I grew up with the Bob Barker Price is Right. So I'm going to stamp it twice. Somebody recently asked a question actually in one of my videos and said, like, you used to outline all of your images and now you don't do that anymore. Two things happened. One was the inks, like if you have to remember back to when we first started with the alcohol markers, the only ink available was Memento Tuxedo Black, and it is not a true black. It is a very light colored black. It's like a dark gray. And I like a bold black. So that contributed to it. Having better inks contributed to me not outlining them. But then also the Misty, being able to stamp them twice to get them as dark as I wanted. There are some that I still, like if it's a thicker line, I do still go back in and outline them, but you just don't see it as often because I don't need to do it as often. For the faux wood grain, this is not difficult or challenging at all. Basically just make a bunch of wavy lines. You're not going to see... You're basically, with all you can see, like as I'm holding this here so I can get where the shadow will go, there's not really a whole lot of this old school vinyl sticker wood that we're going to see. But I do want to include it because that is part of my memory. The nostalgia part of it, if you will. But basically you're just going to do a bunch of wavy lines. I have a whole video on how to draw your own wood grain, much more specific than this, and it looks probably a lot better. But for such a small area, I'm just doing some wavy lines and some curves. I started out thinking it was going to be that the E57 was going to be dark enough. It's not. I'm going to switch over to an E59 and make it even darker because, again, that lines up with what my memory is of the television that we owned. Anyway, back to story time. So if you guys have watched my videos in the past, some of the ones that I've talked about my dad, you may know that my dad was, he was a tradesman. That's what he did. He was a blue collar worker. And my dad got into pipe fitting when he was 18 years old, and he was a pipe fitter until he retired at 60. And if you know somebody who's in the trades, or you yourself, somebody in your family has been in the trades, you know that a lot of times with trades, they have layoffs. And my dad obviously started off as an apprentice and then to a journeyman and then, finally to a foreman running his own jobs. And when you get a little bit higher up, you're less likely to be laid off. The longer that you work for a union, the more seniority that you get, you're less likely to be laid off. But in the beginning, it can't be avoided. And so when I was growing up, my mom, until I was in 6th grade, was a stay-at-home mom. She worked at Ford, and they were doing layoffs because, again, here we go. We're in another union. I come from a blue-collar family. Like, you want to know why I care so much about the middle class and that I believe that our country is built on the backs of the middle class? It's because, baby, I'm middle class. I've been my whole life. So, anywho, when they were looking for people to take the layoff, my mom was laid off. And then when they called her back, she actually had just had my middle sister. So she opted to continue to take the layoff. And she did that until I was in 6th grade. When I was in 6th grade, obviously I was heading into middle school. I was her youngest child. And so she went back to work full time. But before that, and this is where we talk about like being marriage it's not 50-50. Like sometimes you can only show up with 20 and the other person has to cover the 80 because that's what a partnership is. When my dad would get laid off in the winter, my mom would go to work. And so she worked at a couple of different places. She worked at a clothing store. She worked at Walmart. She worked at just a couple of little places. But when that happened, my dad was then responsible for taking care of us, right? And my dad had a couple of hobbies. They bowled. That's how they met in Ohio. Bowling is still a thing. So they met as bowlers. My dad also, pre-children, hustled a little bit of pool. They enjoyed gambling, and my dad watched TV. That's what he did. That's the vast majority of the time that I spent with my father growing up was watching television. And it's where my love of law enforcement and a good mystery came from watching Columbo with him. I laugh to myself now that I have my own children, the way, like, the movies that they used to let us watch, and my dad would just cover my whole face with his hand when it was an inappropriate part. Like, I would never even think of doing that now. I just tell my kids they can't watch it. But anyway, but when he was laid off in the winter and we were home from school, we watched The Price is Right. That is how we spent our time. And it was like 10:30 or 11 o'clock. And that is what we did. Growing up in my household, and it probably was similar for those of you who are in my age range or maybe a little bit older. When my dad was home, he picked what was on TV. But while that drove me nuts as a child, and it is part of the reason why I don't do it to my children now, there are some things that I was then exposed to, like The Price is Right. Like, I wouldn't normally watch that, right? That I got to watch not only with him, but it was like the way that we spent time together, and we would talk about it, and just like we would talk about Columbo when that was on. And as I got older, and I was working at the police station, I was working night shift, I would work every weekend. So, like, Saturday night, I would work until 7:30 in the morning. And when I came home, I'm a night owl. My mom's always been a night owl as well. But my dad would always be up, especially because by that time he was retired. But he would always be up. And so on Sunday mornings, I would come home from work, and I don't know, you've never had a high stress job. This might be hard to understand, but when you have had a high stress job and it's been a very busy night, and back then it was always, all the weekends were always busy, it's hard to come home and go right to sleep. So I would come home on Sunday mornings, and we would get the Sunday paper, and I would have a cup of coffee, and I would sit around and talk to my dad, and we would do the crossword together while we watched TV. And that's how I spent my Sunday mornings. And it was one of my very favorite things to do, honestly. Everybody my whole life has told me that I am my father's daughter, and we are very similar. I see that now as I'm, getting older. It's hard to see it when you're a teenager and you're busy arguing about everything, but you're busy arguing about everything because you're exactly alike. But I am very much like my dad. And my mom too, obviously. But my kind of just say it like it is, kind of no nonsense, very direct. Not to be hurtful. My intention is never, to be hurtful, but I'm also not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you the truth, whether that hurts your feelings or not. Because I care enough not to lie to you. That's basically what it comes down to. But anywho, I totally get that from my dad. That's absolutely from my father. And so, when I saw this, and even, I think he still, like, he even watches it, the Drew Carey version. I think he still does. I don't, obviously. I don't watch much TV at all. But a lot of my memories of spending time with my dad, because I was not, like, an athletic child. I didn't do, I ran track. That was pretty much it. But I didn't do, even, like, back then, it was kind of split more, feminine and masculine. Like, you would have ballet or dance or gymnastics. I didn't do any of those neither. I also didn't play, basketball or baseball or softball. I've just never been very athletic, and I've never been drawn to it. So a lot of the time that I was able to spend with my dad was spent in conversation. And sometimes, that was just about whatever happened on the season of TV that we were watching. So that's, as soon as I saw this set, I was like, that's absolutely going to be my Father's Day card. Let's talk, this is kind of a shorter video for me, so we're trying to get it all in, folks. what you see here is most of the time I'm doing maybe three color blends, some two color blends, and that's because, quite honestly, there is not enough real estate here for me to justify four color blends. It just, like, Bob's making his suit black, like, he's right up front, so, and he's larger, so it's a little easier to get that in there. Same thing with the like the showcase stand, that's a little bit larger, so it's easier to get some more detail in there. But as far as like the contestants, they're all two color blends. The wheel is not accurate. I'm gonna be honest with you. The wheel is not accurate. The true wheel back then was the 100 was green with red letters, and then the two on the other side of it were what were they? They were gold. The other ones, all the other ones were black with like gold letters. But anyway, I tried to get it as close to, but all of them are stamped in black, so I couldn't change the color. I think those might have been in red too, but maybe just a different color. But the green I know was 100 with the red color. But anyway, now we're to the building portion of it. This comes together really easily. The only part, like I said, that was a little bit finicky was those little channel buttons. But we took care of that with the low tack tape to make it super easy. So I'm just going to go in, the gel press, the glue press does help make it much easier because I have a fine tip on there. So I can get, really fine lines of glue that is very helpful. Here, once I put it in, I realized I had left a little bit of a white corner. So I'm very gingerly going in and just filling in that corner. As I said previously, my parents' TV has always been catty corner, so that's kind of how I envisioned doing my background scene. But this die is pretty wide. I think it is about 4 inches. So on a A2 size card in a portrait, orientation, that's the word I want, it does take up almost the whole thing. So I did try to do a scene, but it just didn't look right. So that I just changed it and decided I was just going to make it super simple. Could I have made my own background again? Yes. Was it easier to do pattern paper? Yes. Will my father notice that it's pattern paper and I didn't hand draw it? No, he will not. He will not. And right now I am up to my eyeballs in Father's Day cards because not only do I have my husband's, my dad's, and my father-in-law's from us, but then I also have my husband's, my father-in-law's, and my dad's from the kids. And then unless I want to take Nathan shopping for a card for his dad, I also have his to make as well. So I'm just going to give you the heads up as we're heading into Father's Day weekend. There's going to be so many Father's Day card videos. Now, hopefully there's other things in here that you see different techniques that you're like, I could use this for other things. But I think I maybe have one video that isn't Father's Day, but other than that, y'all, that's where we're at. That's the season we are living in. So here, the sentiment has the like breaking news and this just in, which I think is totally cute. But it also has you're the best host. Well, it has you're the and then best host. And I wanted mine to say you're the best dad. So I'm going to stamp it and heat emboss it just like I normally would, but that's only because, can you see the gapping, like the spacing in between the words? I know that there is enough after the word best that I can cut off the word host and it won't look weird. So if you have one that is too close together and you can't just cut it off, before you ink everything, put a piece of tape over it, tape it so you can mask it, ink it up, remove the tape, and then stamp it down, and then you won't have that word to contend with. So the two, that this just in and you're the best, I'm just going to trim into little labels. I decided with the this just in to do it as more of like a diagonal cut on the end because it just offered a little bit more interest. The you're the best is going to be bookended by that dad. And that dad has a more interesting layout. Plus, I have a lot of straight edges in this card. Like, I have the ground, the what is that, baseboard, and let's talk about the baseboard for a second. So originally I had cut it to be white, and then I realized that was way too modern. Back then, nobody in the 90s, nobody was painting their baseboards or their cupboards. They were all oak if you could afford it, but they were all definitely wood grain back then. So I took the same markers that we used for the faux wood grain on the TV, and I just used, I think, the E59 and the E57 to color that in. And I am adhering this to a piece of pattern paper. I just chose a blue that matched-ish to the background. Honestly, when I picked it, I thought it matched much better than what it looks like at the end, but I think it's okay. It doesn't need to be a perfect match. Here I'm putting the little feet down, and then the TV will sit on top of this. I absolutely could have popped this up, so that it had more dimension, but because it has all of the layers of cardstock, I didn't really feel like it needed it. But I did have to trim off I'm sorry, I didn't even show you that. I put together the rabbit ears. So it cuts the base, and then one of the antennas, you have to use the die twice to get the other one. But you can see that they're a little bit too long. Yes, the TV that we had the rabbit ears. I'm not making that up. We did have that. We owned it. Just in case you're younger than me and you're like, was this a thing? Yes, it really was. So I had to trim those off just to make it fit, but I needed the room at the bottom because that dad die is relatively large. I mean, comparative to the other sentiments. So I needed the room at the bottom to make sure that dad was going to fit. So I had to sacrifice the length of the rabbit ears, but I think you get the point. I did use a little bit of low profile foam tape to pop up the sentiment portion to add interest, but also because at the bottom, the little feet, the little foot stands for the TV isn't quite as thick as all of the other layers of cardstock, for the actual TV. So in order for my dad to sit a little bit higher than that, I needed to add a little bit of foam tape. So I'm going to do the dad first, just so I can make sure everything fits on the card. And then normally, I would add some rhinestones or something like that. But in this case, I really didn't feel like it needed it. It felt like everything was kind of complete, the little scene for itself. And for me, this is a more nostalgic card. My dad will get it when I give it to him because we used to watch, The Price is Right together. But it may not necessarily be a Father's Day card for everybody else, but it is for me, and so I'm sharing it with you. I did add a little bit of shimmer to the showcase stand for the gold portion. Here, I was trying to knock back that blue a little bit to help it match the background a little bit better. It did not work, by the way. PPS, it did not work. And then I am going to add in just some white highlights on just the gold parts. I'm not going to add it to anything else, but those white highlights are going to be what finishes off the card. I think this is such a cute die, this little retro TV. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me and listening to story time, and I will see you again. I'll see you tomorrow for another video. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Bye.